Hi, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6 Delta Alpha Yankee, and for today's video, I'm kicking off a brand new operator series. And what I'm going to be covering is the Yaesu FT-60. Now, one might ask, why bother with an operator series on a radio that's approaching 21 years old in terms of its design, because it was introduced in 2004. There should be tons of information on that, right? Nope. YouTube didn't even become a thing until like 2014. So this radio never got the fanfare it deserved on its release. And then after YouTube started and radio channels kind of popped up, they were covering what was current at the time. So this sort of fell into a gap of non-coverage. Just some information out there, but there's no real extensive resource. Now, of course, you've always had your manual that comes with the FT-60, which is one of the better manuals I've ever encountered with an amateur radio so far. And that's good for a lot of folks. For a lot of folks, this will get you by. There's also some cheat sheets that you can find online that will get you by. But some people out there, I'm one of those people, they learn better by seeing someone actually demonstrate how it's done and following along. So that's going to be the purpose of this video. I'm going to cover all of the things that I covered in the VX6 series, and hopefully you'll learn how to master your FT-60 so that you can operate it in the field from the front panel without being tied to a computer to get things done. And that's the whole idea with an operator series. And here is where I would normally end it and launch into the first topic we're going to cover. But I want to sort of get ahead of a couple of things that are going to pop up in the comments section, because I guarantee they will. And one of the first things someone is going to say is, well, that's an old, obsolete radio. Well, I covered this in another video where I asked the question, is the FT-60 obsolete or a modern-day masterpiece? And I made a number of points in that video, and you're more than welcome to peruse it if you haven't seen it already. But I want to cover a couple of the points here, just to get past that, because they'll bring up things like, well, this the FT-60 doesn't have modern features like dual watch, dual receive, color display, USB-C charging, lithium-ion battery, and on it goes. And I'll counter with, yeah, it doesn't. And you would be surprised how many people that have, once they finally encounter an FT-60, are able to get right past those bell and whistle features. Sure, it would be nice to have, but for a lot of those folks, they've entered a point in their radio career, so to speak, where they're getting a little bit more serious about their radios, and they want a radio that has excellent performance characteristics. And take the bells and whistles out of the equation, because when you're transmitting and receiving, often none of those things matter at all. Those are all support mechanisms for the radio. But the core function of receiving and transmitting message traffic, that's really where the rubber meets the road. And that's where a lot of these import radios fail, is they focus so much on making their radios look cool, and they focus on those really snazzy displays and a couple of other little bell and whistle features, and they use that to sell the radio. And then the actual radio within that case that has all the cool stuff on it kind of sucks. It'll often be a direct conversion receiver. It'll work and it'll work so-so. I mean, it'll get the job done, but it's by no means distinguishing itself. This is a kind of radio that distinguishes itself. It literally is the gold standard in a couple of very important ways. The first of those is going to be in terms of reception. This has probably one of the best double conversion super heterodyne receivers ever put in an amateur radio HT. It is superb. With a proper antenna mounted to the radio, there's not much that this radio isn't going to receive. And when I talk about receive, we're talking fairly wide band. This covers everything from aviation to bands that you might not ever have messed with. This is excellent in that regard. Transmit is superb. Output power, no, it's not a 12-watt HT. It puts out adequate output power to get the job done. But I will readily admit it's a little dated. Some of the stuff is pretty dated. It definitely looks like something from 2004, which is fine with me. If you want to put this in terms of in like gun terms, for instance, this is the 1911. This is the 1911 of radios. This is one that's going to be around for a long time. Like I said, it's entering year 21, and it's still a bestseller for Yaesu. And it does all of this at a cost that will be surprising to you. To think that you can buy one of the better HTs that you can lay your hands on out there, at least in terms of pure performance, and you can do so for around 160 bucks, is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, at some point, I'm sure Yaesu will eventually get around to some kind of an update. I'm hoping that somebody there is truly going to be the adult in the room, and they're going to say, hey, bolt all of the crazy crap that you want onto this radio. Don't touch anything on the inside of the radio. Don't change the receiver. Don't change the banks. Don't change anything. Give it a dual watch, dual display, colored display, give it a lithium ion battery with USB-C charging, do all of that stuff. Knock yourself out. But leave the radio within untouched, because it is excellent. And that's why I'm happy to be jumping into this operator series. So if you're one of those people that's like, hey, my Baofeng whatever will, no, it won't. Sorry, hate to break your heart. It won't. And I'll illustrate that for you real fast. Let me show you the very first radio I ever bought. Baofeng UV5R. Like a lot of you folks, bought a UV5R. Unlike a lot of folks, I'm able to actually learn and develop, and I don't get stuck in a rut. And I also don't make excuses for equipment that isn't getting the job done. I didn't find out that the UV5R wasn't a very good radio until I had started doing radio. And then I determined, yeah, it's not all that good, to be honest with you. But I stuck with it for a little while, and I upgraded from the UV5R to a BF F8 HP. And I tricked it out with the extendo battery and the cool antenna and all that. And I was, at the time, one of those people that when people would start talking FT-60, I would say, well, I can talk to you on the same repeater you're talking to me. What difference does it make, right? And they would just shake their head, and they didn't want to argue about it. So I bought a second BFF8 HP and tricked that one out too. And for about 6 or 8 months, this was my jam. This was my my full antenna farm that I had going. And I started, again, doing radio in the field, working events, things like that. Had a couple of times where these radios got desensed and I couldn't hear anything. The front ends got overwhelmed by RF in the area. Had some other issues with my transmissions not being heard all that clearly. It started implanting some seeds of doubt in the direction that I had taken. And I had heard so much about the FT-60s, and I mentioned this in that other video. I had a long conversation with my son-in-law on a trip to Disneyland where I had one of these radios with me, and I was trying to talk myself into spending the money for an FT-60. Well, when I got back, the first thing I did was I bought my first FT-60, and I never touched another Baofeng radio again until I started reviewing radios for this YouTube channel. I used this and other radios moving forward, and still do to this day, because the second thing, so this is radio 4 that I bought. Radio 5 was a second FT-60. And the reason for that is the theory of 2 is 1, 1 is none. I wanted to make sure I always had at least one FT-60 in my life, so I got a spare. And I still to this day use these radios all the time. If I absolutely have to make a contact on the radio with an HT, I mean, I absolutely must make that contact. The radio I'm most likely to grab is one of these FT-60s, and that is to this day, despite all of the other radios that I own. So these things literally are excellent. And a lot of you out there agree, and an operator series is not meant to sell you on an idea for a radio. It's meant to present information to others that own these radios or are considering these radios. So that's enough of my my proselytizing on the FT-60. I'll leave it at that. But the FT-60 has a lot going for it, and I'm going to continue to expand on those ideas moving through the series. But the next installment of this series, I'm going to go over basic control functions of the radio. This is just kind of an introduction into the FT-60. So I will be back in the next installment, and we'll talk about, just take a run around the radio and show you some of the stuff that it does and how to get into a few things. And then from there, we'll start building out and learn how to do things like program the radio from the front panel, and on it goes. So with that, I'll bring this one to an end, and I'll be back with part 2 shortly. This is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee from Visalia, California. Have a wonderful day.